Hello, welcome to our webinar session. Today we'll be talking about investing and living in Portugal, tax benefits and property purchase. Next to me I have Luís Leão from Deloitte Portugal, specialist in international tax, and Rafael Ascenso, General Manager of Porta de Frente Christie's, a real estate reference in Portugal. We'll be talking first about living in Portugal, the attractiveness of Portugal with Rafael. Then Luís will talk about the non-habitual resident regime. And at the end, we'll have a Q&A session where you can put all your questions below the video in the comment box, and we will answer all your questions. So I'll begin with Rafael. We know that you sold more than properties to more than 30 nationalities in the past years, which clearly reflects the interest in moving to Portugal. Can you tell us more about the attractiveness of Portugal? Why do people want to come here? Why it's so good?
Yeah, in fact, it was 36 different nationalities. It was our best year in the past 5. To give you a brief notion of what happened in the real estate market in Portugal for the past years, you probably all know that we had a big crisis in 2008, like the rest of Europe. It struck really the real estate market from 2008 to 2012. We estimate that the market dropped more or less 25%. It was not equal in every region, but in average terms was more or less 25%. Since then, with these two programs that we will talk next intervention, we start a growing process. The dynamic of the market started, and it was really good. We recovered those 25% in average terms, and now I think that we are more or less 10% above those times before the crisis. And I think that now we are living a steady market because finally, last year, the offer equaled the demand. So we believe that in the next couple of years, we'll have a very dynamic market at the time, but with not the same growth that we existed for the past years, that we witnessed the last year. So the main reasons why people start coming to Portugal, besides those two programs, is the quality of life. Of course, we have, comparing with the rest of Europe and the rest of the main cities in Europe, we have a great quality of life here, cheaper than in those cities, much cheaper in some cases. We are the 4th most secure country in the world. It's important, not only for people that come from other continents, but also for European citizens, because in Europe we are living some difficult times in some countries, and those clients search for tranquility, for security, and that's what we have here to offer. So those are perhaps the two more interesting points, and the two main reasons why people are investing and coming to live here. Not only investing, but coming to live to Portugal. So we hope this trend continues. We have all the faith that it will continue. And well, that's it. It's the two main reasons.
Yes, thank you. And what kind of real estate do we have to offer? What are the main areas where European buyers choose to buy a house?
Well, we operate mainly in the Lisbon region, so I can only talk about the region of Lisbon. Region of Lisbon has two completely different lifestyle areas. we have the center of Lisbon, which is a typical city with all that a big city has to offer. And then we have the coastal area of Lisbon, where we are at this moment, Estoril and Cascais, which has completely different lifestyles. Normally, people that have big families, children, prefer to live in this area because you can find big properties with gardens, pools, which is very difficult to find in the center of Lisbon. And you have a lifestyle more to the open, more to the you have a lot of, well, we have the ocean here, so we have a lot of beaches here, and golf courses. We have 7 golf courses in a range of 15 minutes by car. All the international schools, the English international schools, are in this area. The only exceptions are the French school and the German school, which are in Lisbon. So it's much more pleasant for people that has big families and children, young children. Lisbon, it's wonderful for people that are in a, well, not older people, but with a different kind of approach that wants to be close to cinemas, to theaters, to very, very nice restaurants, and that don't want to use car. In Lisbon, you don't need to use car. You can go, can walk, you have wonderful public transportation. And in Cascais and Estoril area, no, you have to use the car. So there are 2 completely different lifestyles. So what we have to offer, we have to offer wonderful apartments in Lisbon mostly, and we have also very good condominiums with pools, gardens, and all those equipments in Cascais, and also big houses, gardens, and well, it's different from one place to the other.
Okay. 2 lifestyles.
2 completely different lifestyles.
Luis, can you tell us more about the tax benefits of investing in Portugal?
Well, more than investing in Portugal, the NHR program, the non-habitual residency program, is first and foremost a regime for tax residents. So the first thing is that people will have this regime if they move to Portugal and they start living in Portugal. So Portugal needs to be the main place of residence. Does this mean that people need to spend their entire year here in Portugal? No, it doesn't. So people need to live in Portugal, whatever that means. And mainly what they cannot do is they should not spend the majority of the year in one other given country. So if they spend 2 months in one country, 2 months in another country, they could easily live 4, 5, 6 months per year in Portugal and qualify as a tax resident of Portugal. How is this regime different from the normal regimes? The regime has mainly 2 features. 1, unemployment and self-employment income. It is possible, depending on the activity, to have a flat rate of 20% of tax and not the normal progressive rates that in Portugal for normal residents, such as all of us, they go up to 53%. So this is a very important feature, and the tax rate of 20% is actually very competitive in terms of Europe. The second feature of the regime deals with foreign income. There are some misconceptions, and we hear a lot that people that are NHRs move to Portugal and do not tax any foreign income. That is not true. The regime has, in fact, exemptions on foreign sourced income, but the exemption depends on type of income and country of source. As an example, people that move into Portugal and have investments in tax havens, what normally is called as offshores, do not benefit from exemptions. So Portugal does not work for people that have investments in Jersey, the Bahamas, or Gibraltar, for example. The regime is very interesting for people moving into Portugal that have investments in stock or bonds, because, for example, dividends that are not from tax havens are fully exempt in Portugal. And depending on the country of source, they could actually have a reduction of tax or they may not be taxed altogether. For example, dividends flowing from the UK into Portugal are not taxed in the UK and are exempt under the NHR program here in Portugal. Same with interest. So interest on bonds or bank accounts that are from abroad are fully exempt in Portugal. And for example, bank accounts in Luxembourg or some treasury bonds are also not liable to taxation in the country of source. So it is possible to move into Portugal and do not have to pay any tax on certain income from investments. The other two main areas that also grant exemptions on foreign income are capital gains on real estate. So any capital gain on a foreign real estate will not be taxed in Portugal, and the same with rental income. Again, foreign rental income. It may be taxed in the country where the real estate is located, but there will be no taxation in Portugal. Last but not least, probably the most famous feature of all of the NHR program, foreign pensions. So on foreign pensions, even if they are from tax havens, there is a total exemption in Portugal. So foreign pensions are not taxed in Portugal. And in most of the countries, the country of source cannot tax that pension, at least on private pensions. It's different for public pensions or sometimes from pensions paid by the Social Security system. But in the private pensions, namely pensions paid from pension funds, there will be no tax in the country of source and in Portugal. Some countries have already made a sign to the Portuguese government that they wanted to change the program. So far, the only change that actually occurred was with Finland, and as of January 2019, the tax treaty between Portugal and Finland has been suspended. Therefore, pensions from Finland will continue to be taxed in Finland. This does not change the NHR program. So even Finnish people that are in Portugal will continue to have an exemption on their Finnish pensions. The only change is in Finland. For all of the other countries, so far, only Sweden has given a sign to Portugal that they want to change the agreement, but it has been left at that. So far, there are, as far as we know, no negotiations between Portugal and Sweden to change the treaty, and no other country has actually started renegotiations of the tax treaties with Portugal. Last but not least, in terms of the NHR program, the regime is not automatic, so it is very important for anybody that wants to move to Portugal and have all of the advantage of the regime to be sure to register properly, to ask for the regime. There are deadlines to comply with. There are certain forms that need to be filed. So don't leave things in your own hands and seek professional help to make sure that you do have the regime and all of the benefits that it entails.
Thank you. Rafael, let's say a foreign citizen wants to buy a property in Portugal. What are the main steps to take?
Yeah, well, the first step is to contact us and to give us a brief instruction of what they are looking for, which type of property, how big, and which characteristics they value. And then we start searching. Normally, we do it by email, doing some selection of properties that meets that criteria. And so we try to understand and to inform the client of which kind of properties do we offer or do we have to offer, for which price. Because when you go to a foreign country, you don't know much about that country. You don't know the prices. You don't know which kind of property you should buy in each area. So that's all the kind of information that we are prepared to offer. And so it starts this process. And then it's good to come here and to do the inspection of the properties and to select one. We have sold without anybody coming here. It's not common, but it happens. I think it's better to come here and to inspect properties, to know the market, to know the different regions, because, for instance, if you go to Lisbon, you have several different neighborhoods, very small, but completely different from each other. And so I think it's important to do a tour, not a touristic tour, but to information tour, as we call it. People can feel the living or the lifestyle of each neighborhood. As I told you, it's completely different from one to the other, and to feel the city, to feel the neighborhoods, and to choose where they feel better. So once they select the property, it's very easy. If they select the property, it's second-hand property, it's very easy. Normally you do a promissory contract, some percentage, 10 and 30%. And 1 month's time, 2 months' time, we complete the deal, okay. And the property goes to their hands, and they can take the property. And so it's very easy because the system, the register system, it's very secure. You can, well, in the moment that you are doing the deed, you have all the information that you need, and it's very secure in Portugal. It's an online system, and it's once you sign, the property is already yours. And once it's yours, it's yours. So you don't have any problem, even if the previous owner has problems. That property is completely secure in your name.
Okay. And let's say I'm a citizen who doesn't know the taxes involved in buying a property in Portugal. Mm-hmm. Do you also help the future owner with these kind of matters?
Yes, our service it's complete. We help and we inform of all the taxes. Normally, we have a tax that's EMT, which is the purchasing tax. So you only pay it once when you buy the property, and it varies from 0 to 6%. It reaches the 6% at €500,000, more or less, a little bit more than €500,000, and then you pay stamp tax. It's 0.8%. So on top, what you pay between the taxes and the register, it's more or less 6.9% of the value of the transaction. So that's the taxes you pay only once when you buy the property, and then you pay annually tax that it's more or less 0.35% of the value of that property. It depends on the regions, but it's more or less between 0.3 and 0.4% of the value of the property.
Okay, thank you. And Luis, as a partner of Deloitte in international tax, what kind of services can you provide to this foreign investor? How can you help?
Well, we like to call ourselves a one-stop shop for tax purposes. So for most of the clients, the first thing that they want to do is plan. So before moving into Portugal, we very often do an assessment of the income that the individual has, of where the assets are located, and we help the clients structure their portfolios in terms of making it compliant with Portuguese legislation, and in order to take the most advantage that people can have in terms of the NHR program. For example, there is one type of income that is not exempt under the NHR program, which is capital gains on securities. So very simply, a client that has a portfolio that is based on capital gains on securities can change their portfolio from one that has a lot of capital gains to a portfolio that has a lot of dividends and interest but are exempt. And these sometimes are some very simple planning alternatives that clients have, and not only the very sophisticated tax planning that involves funds here or there. So that's the first part that we help a lot of individuals with. And then we are helping most of the individuals moving into Portugal to deal with all of the paperwork, dealing with all of the compliance. It is always important to know that we are a country of bureaucracy. I know French created bureaucracy, but we took it to the next level. Trust me. You'll know that once you move into Portugal. So we help ease out the whole process. We help getting the tax numbers, dealing with all of the registrations, asking for the NHR program, and then last but not least, dealing with the annual compliance, because not only do people have to have the regime be registered, but every year they need to file their tax return, report the worldwide income, and on the return every year claim the exemptions that are applicable, asset per asset, income per income, to make sure that they do get the correct tax regime of the NHR program.
Okay. Thank you for those who are with us. Thank you for the newcomers. We are now opening our Q&A sessions. We already have some questions, but if you have some more, please write them down in the comments box. Luis, applying for this regime has to be in Portugal. For example, I'm in England and I want to apply for the NHAR. I have to be in Portugal?
Well, people need to be Portuguese tax residents in order to qualify the non-habitual residency program. So to qualify as Portuguese tax residents, a person needs to already have the main place of residence in Portugal. So physically, the person does not need to have moved already to Portugal, but the person has to already have either bought a house or rented out a house that is the main place of residence. That is, in fact, one of the downsides of the regime that a lot of people complain about, which is, well, can I ask for it and then only move after it is approved? The answer is no. People first need to move into Portugal, become Portuguese tax residents, and only after that they can apply for the program. What we do at Deloitte is we have a meeting and a briefing with each individual before they start their process, and we will look at the data in terms of knowing if the person is eligible or not for the program. There is basically only 3 criteria to qualify as NHR in Portugal. First, the person needs to be resident in Portugal. Second, the person may not have been resident in any of the 5 previous tax years. And last but not least, the person needs to apply for the regime and ask for it. So what we do with all of the clients is we will look at their track record, we'll look at their history, and we will see if the person has ever had a registration as tax resident in Portugal or not. If the answer is no, this is my first time, the person can easily move into Portugal because we know they will get the regime.
Okay, I have 2 more. I think it's for you, Luis. Would like to know if an investment in CG shares would be considered a transfer of capital within the gold permit legal framework.
Well, the Golden Visa program has nothing to do with tax. The Golden Visa program is a program for immigration, and that is a separate program. A lot of the times people do mix up both programs, and the Golden Visa program is a program only for third country nationals, so it's not for EU citizens. And as we speak, the UK is still part of the EU, so UK nationals cannot benefit from the Golden Visa program. Apart from that, there are a series of investments that qualify for the Golden Visa program. Investing in Portuguese stock and Portuguese equity is one of them, but it has to be Portuguese stock and Portuguese equity and not foreign stock or equity.
Okay, another one for Luis, a British citizen. Is income from consulting fees earned in Spain after I become resident in Portugal on the NHR regime tax-free?
Well, depends on the consulting that you have. If, for example, we're talking about tax consultancy, that is an activity that is listed by the Portuguese government as high value added, and that will be taxed in Spain, therefore exempt in Portugal. If it's not, it depends on the type of consulting, because just consulting per se is not listed, so it is not exempt, and it does not benefit from the 20% tax rule. But for example, if the consulting is in engineering or is in IT, those are listed as activities that benefit from the 20% rate here in Portugal. So it really depends on what type of consulting we're talking about. It depends on where the activity is performed. And what you need to know is that there will not be taxes in Spain and in Portugal. It will either be Spain or Portugal. And if there is, because the treaty allows it to be, Portugal will either grant an exemption or will grant a tax credit.
The same British citizen asked also from real estate operations. So I think those consulting fees are from real estate operations.
Consulting is consulting from real estate. It's not listed as benefiting from the special 20% rate. So in order to have those operations in terms of consulting, the person should not have them as an individual. It is possible to structure the investment through a company, which could be Portuguese or foreign, but that would take us a little bit more time than we have available for the webinar.
Please contact Luis afterwards and he'll be glad to help you.
My contacts are online on a flyer on the NHL program.
This one is for Rafael. Which are the safest areas in Lisbon for a retired couple?
Well, all Lisbon is very safe. I mean, we don't have security problems. We don't have violence in Portugal, fortunately. But it depends on the lifestyle you like. Once again, if you like to live in a city and have a city life, not depending on the car, and do all your life in Lisbon is not a big city. It's a small city, and so it's very easy to go from one place to the other. So Lisbon would be definitely a good option. But if you prefer to live outside and to have to go to the promenade and walk, and if you like to play golf, or if you like to walk in the mountains or in the hills, you probably be better in Cascais area. But both are really safe. As I told you, we don't have any violence problems here in Portugal.
Another one for Luis. What is the minimum of revenue an individual must have to be qualified for this program?
0. There is no requirement of income whatsoever to be a non-habitual resident. The only criteria is to be resident, not have been resident in any of the 5 tax years preceding the move to Portugal, and be registered in Portugal. So there is no minimum amount required as in other countries.
Okay, thank you. Rafael, which is the best area to buy villas and big houses?
Well, in Lisbon, it's very difficult Lisbon city is very difficult to find a big house. Of course, much more easier in Cascais and Estoril, which is the coastal area, Oeiras, which is in the middle between Cascais and Lisbon. We are talking about 25 minutes by car from the center of Lisbon to Cascais. For example, we have an office where we are right now in Cascais, and we have another office in the center of Lisbon, main avenue of Lisbon, Avenida Liberdade, and it only takes us 25 minutes from one place to the other. So it's very close, but it's very different. So I believe that if you want a big house with nice garden, pool, whatever, it's much easier and much better to find and to live in this area, Cascais, Oeiras. So it's the coastal area of Lisbon.
Thank you. I would like to ask you to put your question below the comment box, please. We are just near the finishing. So, Luis, can you tell us a little more about the main questions and doubts that these foreign investors have when they come to Portugal? Is there anything you would like to add?
Well, there are 2 different aspects that people normally want to know about. First, in terms of wealth and inheritance tax. So it is important for people to know that Portugal does not have wealth tax. I normally say that it would not be worthwhile considering the wealth that exists in Portugal. So governments have never introduced a wealth tax in Portugal. We do not have any reporting of wealth in Portugal either. So that is one thing that other EU countries have that we do not have. We do have inheritance tax. However, it does not apply on foreign assets. So any foreign asset is not liable to inheritance tax. And we have an exemption of inheritance tax between spouses and from parents to children or children to parents. So for the vast majority of the situations, in practice, we can say that there is no inheritance tax in Portugal. There is in fact, a 10% inheritance tax on Portuguese assets that go to non-direct family members. So if the inheritance goes to a cousin, to an aunt, to an uncle, to a niece, to a nephew, then there will be 10% inheritance tax. When it's between spouses or parents to children, there is no tax. The other issue is legal, it's not tax. It has to deal with, under EU law, once people move to Portugal, the law governing the inheritance becomes the Portuguese law. This may create some difficulties for people coming from common law countries, such as the UK, where the inheritance laws are very, very different, or from the Scandinavian countries where part of the laws are also different. What people can do when they come to Portugal is they can contact a law firm and they can choose the law that will govern their inheritance, but it's important to do that so that when time comes, people will have the laws applicable that they want to apply.
Thank you. Rafael, just one last one. Do you have a lot of citizens who want to invest in Portugal, not only living, but to buy a property and then rent it? Do you have really clients that do that?
Yeah, we had a lot of clients for the past years to do that. So they invested as a capital application, and so and put it on the market to rent. There are two kind of markets where you can put your property to rent. Short term, mostly in the center of Lisbon, because we, for you all to have an idea, we had 22 million visitors only last year to Portugal. We were elected for the third time in a row the best city destination in the world. So Lisbon, has been a lot of tourists has been coming to Portugal for the past years, and there is a shortage of hotels. So the Airbnb and other programs have been very with occupation taxes about between 80 and sometimes 90% per year. So it's very high occupation rates. So you can get more or less between 5-7% rentability per year gross. If you put it in the long term, it's also a great market at this moment. You have a little bit less than that. It's more steady. You can get between 3 and 4% per year. So a lot of people bought to put it in the rental market. Both options, you have two options to do that.
I would just add to this that if you're a non-resident of Portugal and you have investments in Portuguese real estate that you put either in the long-term rental or the short-term rental, you will have to pay taxes in Portugal. There are tax obligations as a non-resident, and you will have annual tax filings here in Portugal. So you will have to prepare annual tax returns, pay Portuguese taxes, and then in the country where you live, you will have to claim either exemptions or foreign tax credits to avoid double taxation.
Thank you. We have two more questions coming in. Is it possible for a foreigner to live in Portugal just renting an apartment?
Yes. So the NHR program is applicable to whoever becomes a Portuguese tax resident. And to be a Portuguese tax resident, you can be so by buying real estate or by renting real estate in Portugal. From our experience, most of the foreigners that move into Portugal end up buying real estate rather than renting it out. Well, Rafael, you know better than me the reasons why that is.
Yeah, and perhaps some people start to rent a property, and then in 2 or 3 months after, they love this and they buy a property.
Another one for Luis. Could you explain the difference between 6% IVA and 23% IVA in terms of remodeling and construction? Luis or Rafael?
Oh, gosh. Basically, and it would take me too long to explain the difference. It's for refurbishments where basically it is most labor, less equipment, or less materials, and it's for private renovations. And let's leave it at that, because or else I'd stay here for about an hour.
We have 5 more minutes.
So just as a summary, renovations whereby the vast majority of the price is manpower, hours spent, and not materials.
And there is also some city halls defined areas that they call rehabilitation areas, and those areas you can get the 6%, and outside that areas it will be a little bit more difficult to have that 6% VAT.
Okay. We don't have any more questions, so we will now close the session. Thank you, Luis, and thank you, Rafael, for being here. Thank you to all participants. You can check our properties in www.portadefrente.com. You can also send us email. We will gladly share the contacts of Luis. And you can also follow us on our social media platforms, and hope to see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for being with us.